Record. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 2 o'clock session. I am so happy to introduce William Gee from East Carolina University. He is the director on the CUS Executive Board, so he gets special treatment. His presentation, Resetting Course Reserves, I'm actually very excited about this. It's one of the few sessions William and I were laughing earlier, that's actually not about embedded librarianship and teaching. It's about circulation and interlibrary loan, which is something that we all do, but I don't think we really get to talk about it quite as much. So I'm really excited about this one. So my name's Kelly McAllister. I'll be your moderator. If you guys look at the bottom of your screen and click on that chat box icon, then a chat box will appear on your screen. And this is where you're going to be able to put in all of your questions and comments and emojis or whatever the mood strikes you as you're watching this presentation. I have gone ahead and put a link to the North Carolina Library website where all of these sessions are located, and that is also the link of where these sessions will be archived. So sometime next week you'll be able to access handouts and previous YouTube videos of the sessions that were going on today. At the end of the session, I'm going to put down an evaluation link for you to review and fill out at your leisure. You'll also get an evaluation with a follow-up email once the sessions are all over. So that being said, William, take it away.
Well, thanks, Kelly. As she said, my name is William Gee, and I am the Circulation and Interlibrary Loan Librarian at Junior Library East Carolina University. I've been in the role for a few years now. Before then, before that, I was the head of interlibrary loan. And so there are still things about the circulation side of my job that I am still learning, and one of those is about course resolves. And so I'll begin to get into that in just a moment. I served on the planning committee for this conference, and one of the themes that we talked about perhaps having was failures and successes. And as we talked about that, I thought, you know, I might have something to say about that, because our course resolves could fall under the failing side of that theme. And so I'll just begin with that. So just to let you know, I do stutter, so bear with me if I have some disfluencies. I'll get through them in just a moment. So let me advance the slide. Let me figure that out. There we go. So resetting course resolves has come about from our rethinking course resolves. In the summer of 2016, the resolves manager in my department left unexpectedly. And so that prompted us to rethink and look at what course resolves was and where we wanted it to go. I did a lit review, and we talked around, and we looked at really in depth at what our course resolves was. And we decided to phase in some changes over this year and next year about our physical resolves and the electronic resolves. As far as the vacant job, we decided to refocus that on the expanding circulating equipment role of our department, and split the course resolves role between two other staff that we already have. Before we get in depth into what we did, let's quickly touch on course resolves, what they are and why. In the lit review that I did, I found this fun article from 1933 that explained the point of course resolves, and it holds up fairly well today. It is to make items available for all in a class for a short time in a way that they all have access to. What we don't do anymore, at least I don't think anybody does, is still have a resolved room in the library where everyone has to stay with a resolved item. We got rid of that here well before I came. I think about 20 years ago or so is when they got rid of the course resolved room. Although I have been told where the wall was that they took out that separated it from the rest of the floor. In that lit review, I found that there's nothing really new under the sun when it comes to physical course resolves. I found going back to the 1920s that a lot of what they were talking about way back then are things we're still talking about course resolves now. It's getting professors to request the titles early. It's having the titles available in the collection or buying them so that they'll be here when the classes begin or they need them for their assignments. The best way to arrange the course resolve items, is it by the book author or the title or the course or the professor or the call number? There are great reasons to do it multiple ways. Is it closed or open stacks? Some places have their course resolves open, although traditionally most of us have it behind the SALC desk for staff only. How long should a course resolve circulate for? Is it in library use only, or can it leave the building? Getting students to use course resolves, and when they do, returning the items on time, and when they don't, how much to charge. I found an article from the 1930s by somebody at UNC Chapel Hill where they charged 25 cents an hour for a late course resolves, and in today's money that would be about $4.65, and my library now charges $5. So we've kept up with inflation, which is interesting that that it's about the same percentage as it was way back then as far as a late fine. Of course, what did change with course resolves was e-resolves in the 1990s, and especially in the 2000s. The print articles that were kept on course resolve began to be put online, and that brought up a lot of changes that we're still reeling with today. Do we have an e-resolve system, or just use the learning management system of the university, like Blackboard, which we use at ECU? It brings up questions about licensing. Are we allowed to use the electronic resources content that we have in course resolves? Most of them allow it, some don't. And so we have to watch that. But the big one is copyright. Making sure that non-students don't have access to it, making sure that we track repeat use depending on your interpretations of the guidelines and if those should be followed or not. How much is too much? Is it the halt of the walk? It might not be a lot, but is it the main point? And so we should not have the main point on course resolves. Who scans the items, if it's from print or microfilm? Is it the faculty or is it the library? And of course, do we ask permission? Do we pay royalties? Do we claim fair use? Do we do all three, depending? And who seeks and pays? Is it the faculty? Is it their department? Or is it the library? So all of these have come up with e-resolves, and those aren't really resolved. With the Georgia State case winding through the courts year after year, we keep getting reinterpretations of what we should be doing with electronic course resolves. Which brings me to what ECU has done. When we looked at our physical resolves, we were pretty surprised when we delved into the specifics. And this might be the failure part of the theme. We found that 217 faculty had over 2,100 items on physical resolves. When we looked deeper in that, we found 69 of those faculty weren't teaching anything the next semester. They didn't teach anything. Some had become administrators, and some had retired or left, and a few had actually died. So their items really should not be on course resolves anymore. We found about half the titles had been on resolve for more than 4 years, which seemed inappropriate. A third of the titles had never circulated while on resolves, and looking at the previous semester, we found only 13% of the titles had circulated at least once in that semester, which was a lot lower than we thought, looking at the statistics that we were looking at, and I'll get to that in a moment. We found that some courses had changed departments and course numbers. So if somebody had come up to the desk with their course name, we wouldn't have found it because it was still under the old name. If they came up with the faculty name or the title of the book, we would have found it in the catalog, but we wouldn't have found it on the shelf if we just looked at the shelf for that particular course. So that was a problem. We found that there were newer editions of some of the books in the circulating collection, which one would think if the faculty were keeping their course resolves up to date, we would have replaced the older one with the newer one and put the old one in the circulating collection. So that was intriguing. We found that a number of the DVDs were also in our streaming media collection now, so why would we need to have the DVD on course resolve anymore? When most everybody can stream video now. And as we talked amongst ourselves, we found that we all had experiences of patrons coming to the desk, wanting something, finding out it was on course resolve and what that meant, which typically is that it's 3-hour in-library use only, and then saying, never mind, and walking away. We also found that some of the librarians also had that experience where we wanted something, and then we decided, you know what, we really don't want to sit in the library and watch the film or read the book for just a couple of hours either, and we should not make an exception for ourselves that we don't make for the patrons. So we ourselves had found out that we did not really like the course resolves limitations either. So as we looked at all of the problems, we thought, how did we get here? And we found out that what we were tracking of course resolves was the overall checkout numbers and the numbers of items that we put on and took off course resolves each semester. And those numbers were all robust. In fact, the year before, our physical course resolves had increased by 16%. So it looked like course resolves was doing fine. But what we weren't doing was looking at the per title use, how long things had been on course resolves, and we weren't checking to see if the courses were still being taught, or indeed if the faculty even still worked at ECU. So those we found we need to make sure that we do these things going forward. The rationale was also that faculty ask us to place things on course resolve, so they're supposed to ask us to take things off course resolves. It's just the way things work. There is a form for them to put it on, there's a form for them to take it off. We send them an email at the end of each semester that says what's on course resolve for them, for their class, how many times it's circulated, and we ask them, should it stay on course resolve or not? And what was happening was if they did not reply, we just took that to mean it should stay on, which was the absolute wrong decision. We should have removed it if they didn't reply. The thought was also, though, why inconvenience faculty to make them add things on course resolve and take them off and then add them back the next year when the course came around to teach again in the fall? Why not just leave things on course resolve? It's easier for the faculty, it's easier for the staff. We don't have to spend the time, we don't have to spend all the money on all the stickers and then take the stickers all off the books and all of that. And then we need the course resolves to mostly be 3-hour in-library use only because they're in such high demand. So we need them here all the time, available for all the students who come up to the desk and want them at the same time. And we found that really isn't the case when we look at the SOC stats for most items. There are some that are in incredibly high demand, and that's what boosted the overall checkout numbers for these outliers that we had that were incredibly popular. And quite frankly, we were focused on other things the past few years. We merged the departments, we were doing cross-training, we had to completely revamp all of our financial processes and reporting and go after debt going back 20 years, according to the university. And so, and then a whole bunch of other things that we had. And course resolves was not a high priority because it seemed to be doing okay just looking at the stats we were looking at. What we're doing with physical course resolves anew is we are trying to encourage the faculty to do a few things. To rethink what course resolves are. It really should be for required assignments. They need an item to do an assignment, not things that would be good for them to read or recommended or supplemental, because those kinds of things really aren't being used. And I think if we all think back to our time in undergrad or grad school, how many times did we go and look at the supplemental recommended things ourselves? And then that should inform us of that we should try to explain that to the faculty and make sure they see the circulation figures that we send them. What had been happening was the system that we use would automatically send out these emails with all of that information in them. And we think people probably thought they were spam or it was not important or something because it came from a system email address instead of a personal one. So we're changing that. We're presenting faculty with the knowledge that they might want to ask collection development to buy an ebook or get the video on our streaming services instead of using physical course resolve, so that more in the class can use them more conveniently at the same time instead of just having the one item on course resolve. Trying to ask the faculty to consider not having everything or most things be 3-hour in-library use only. Let them go out for 24 hours or 3 days or 7 days or something if things aren't going to be needed all at once by everyone in the class. Some things like the chemistry solutions manual, which circulates by far more than anything else, and we have 5 copies, I think, that needs to stay 3 hours because it is in truly high demand. But the other 80% of the ones on Resolve, they're not in high demand. So we also rearranged how they were on the shelves. Before, they were on there by the faculty name and then by the course. Well, in talking with everyone who works at the desk, we found out that a lot of students don't know their course numbers and they don't know their faculty members' names, which surprised us greatly. But we all had many times where we'd help somebody and they didn't know those things. They knew that it was a math book and part of the title said something like this. So we thought if we rearrange the shelves by discipline and then by faculty and course, we could at least go and get to the math section and scan for something like that they remember. Or, you know, it's the blue book, which we get at the desk a lot too. So that helps us identify the blue math book because it's in the math section. So that's something that we changed. When we email faculty, we now, if they don't reply, we're taking the items off. And then if they really did want the items on Course Resolve, then we'll add them back. But the likelihood is that they probably don't need to be on Course Resolve anymore. And hopefully they'll reply to their emails in the future, if that happens. Who knows? We have also decided that library materials won't be kept on Course Resolves during semesters when the class is not being taught. If the faculty want to leave their own personal copies on Resolve for that, as long as we have space, and we do right now, that's fine, but the library items will be removed and put back into circulation, so somebody who might want the book could use the book for more than 3 hours at a time in the library. So that takes us into what we're going to do in electronic resolves. So right now, like probably most of you, what we do with electronic course resolves is we get the request and we find that we actually have access to it online, and so we put a link to the article into the faculty members course Blackboard page for them. And then if they ask for something that is in the print or microfilm collection, then we we'll scan that and put that into the Blackboard page for the faculty member. All of that takes time to do, of course. And in doing all of that, we have to try to comply with copyright and licensing, and that is not our specialties on the day-to-day. And if you know anything about those, it is a very large gray area on what should or should not happen with electronic course resolve. So we refer faculty to fair use checklists. We question anything that seems possibly excessive to us. We really don't know how people are trying to use these items in their courses, so we don't know if it's transformative use or not, and the court seems to smile fondly upon a transformative use instead of just some kind of rote use, I suppose. And then we advise them about permissions and royalties. This library, strangely, in my mind, has not been in the big business of obtaining the permissions or paying for course resolves. All of that is supposed to be done by the faculty who put things on course resolve, and they're supposed to keep all of that documentation themselves. So that is an odd outlier, I think, from what I've read and heard about a lot of other libraries. So that is, it's interesting that that's been happening. And we really looked at the statistics, and we have seen that the use has been dwindling in recent years, despite lots of publicity about course resolves. And I think that might be why course resolves had that bump last year of use, but still the use of electronic course resolves by the faculty to ask to put things on there has been decreasing, and it's not very much anymore. So what we plan to do with course resolves in the future, starting next year, is to not do course resolves anymore. We've come to that decision because so many faculty put their own documents into Blackboard that they don't really need us to do so anymore. It removes the library from the role of copyright police. The faculty are responsible to ensure compliance with copyright for what they hand out in their classes and for what they show to their classes and for what they put into Blackboard themselves. So this seems like a natural outgrowth that they can just put these articles and put the links in to their Blackboards with some instructions that we provide to them. So why have us in the middle of it questioning what the faculty are doing? when we don't necessarily know if it's a good fair use or not. They're more of a judge of that than we are, we think. So the university copyright officer and the library's scholarly communications department are doing a lot on campus about how to comply. And so we feel that it makes sense to do this change now. And we're not cutting faculty off from our collections. We will still do our document delivery service, where we will scan from the print and microfilm and send to them. And then what they do with the file at that point is up to them, and what they believe is within their fair use rights, or what they've obtained permission for, or what they've paid to be able to do with it. So the change has also happened because we have lost a staff role in the department, and we have lost a lot of money for student employees in the department. And so we are looking at how to reprioritize what we do, and this was one thing that we thought perhaps we could let go of, was the electronic results. So that's where we're thinking of going with that. And I think that's what I had prepared to say. So I'm happy to answer your questions about what we do here. And I'm very eager to hear about what you do at your institution with course resolves.
Hey everybody, and if you want, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves and ask your questions if that would be easier. Just right click on your name and click unmute. And I also put a link to the evaluation in the chat box as well. So if you feel more comfortable asking your questions in the chat box, you absolutely can.